welcome to the STEM Brothers podcast. My name's Quasi Vincent,
And I'm Bossier Vincent.
and we are the STEM Brothers. Thank you very much for downloading or streaming our podcast, or maybe listening to it on YouTube. However, you're consuming this, we want to thank you for your time. Let me start by I'm going to briefly introduce the concept of the podcast and then go into a little bit of my background, and I'll let my brother talk a little bit about his background as well as to why we're here talking to you about STEM. What is STEM? Let's start with that. If you've downloaded this podcast, I suspect you know what it is, but let me just go through it one more time. It's science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. It is an acronym that has been used a lot in the media today, used a lot in education. There is an issue going on in this country. Finally, after many years of what is, in my opinion, poor educational policy around the particular subjects dealing with science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, we finally hit a point in this country where we have such a sharp divide between those who are participants in the STEM industry and those who are not. Let's face it, everybody's not going to grow up and be a scientist, doctor, engineer, whatever have you, but we do have a crisis in this country where we have people who are not literate in the subjects of science and mathematics, and therefore are not as literate as they should be with technology. And when I say literate, I mean not that you don't know how to download the latest app on your smartphone. Of course you do. By literacy, I'm talking about, do you actually understand how this works? And once again, not talking about, can you build your own cell phone? Doesn't have to go that far. But do you at least understand what physical forces, what natural phenomena are at work in order to make the cell phone work? Thereby understanding what potential health risks there are to using a cell phone. What are the potential issues that deal with different changes as the technology advances and goes further down the line? What's happening in our world as it relates to technology? Being technology literate, being scientifically literate, being mathematically literate isn't about necessarily becoming an engineer or a scientist. It's just about understanding the world around us and the impact that technology has on our society. So that's what this podcast is about. That's the mission of our podcast, to break these things down in terms of how technology, and I'll use technology as just a catch-all for a variety of things that are involved with, that are made or produced through the manipulation of science and mathematics and other technology. But I'm going to use technology across the board. And the reason why I want to include that qualifier is because, hey, are you wearing shoes right now? I'm guarantee you somewhere along the line, some type of material scientist, some type of engineer, either on the manufacturing end, as I mentioned, putting together the materials for those shoes, they had a role to play in that. The clothes that you're wearing, right? To take cotton from a plant and to synthesize that into a shirt that you're wearing with different colors. There's tons of processing, manufacturing different things, manipulation of the physical properties of these raw materials into something useful that are taking place. And it's important you understand what's happening with these things in a way that, again, you don't have to get lost in the weeds in terms of being able to, quote unquote, go out there and build it and do it yourself, but you want to understand generally what's happening. How's this production process impacting the environment? How does it impact the quality of the material that you're wearing? these are some of the questions we're going to explore. So when I say technology, I mean anything that has to do with how something is made or created in our world. So while we'll certainly have our fair share of talking on consumer products and consumer electronics and the typical things used to be associated with technology, we're going to go and touch on things throughout the duration of our podcast, which we hope this is episode one of just several for many years to come that we have. We're going to touch on a variety of topics that cut across all areas of our life, all areas of society, all things that we interact in. So that was the purpose of the podcast, or this is the purpose of the podcast, because now to just go a little bit into my background, I got my degree in electrical engineering from the Pennsylvania State University. We are Penn State. It was quite an experience. And one of the things I realized after going through 4 years of engineering school is I did not quite understand the importance of what it was that I was pursuing. I did not know really what engineers did in the real world. And it's something that's always bothered me throughout my career. So I worked in telecommunications for a few years for Lucent Technologies, one of the big time telecommunications equipment makers in the world. AT&T, a big multinational company, was the original parent company of Lucent Technologies and spun off. Bell Labs, different things like that. The basic foundations of what communications is today, discovered by Bell Labs. So Lucent Technologies is all part of this system. So I worked with them for a few years in a lot of project management type work, kind of non-technical work, because I wasn't quite sure, what to be honest, my hardcore technology skills weren't that well refined, nor was my level of awareness. So I approached engineering, quite frankly, in the wrong way. I approached it as strictly an academic discipline, not as a discipline of what is it that I can create? What problems can I solve? And we'll talk more about that in this podcast and in future podcasts in terms of what is it, how to go about studying science and mathematics so that you are approaching it the way it should be approached, as tools to help solve problems, as tools to help make things better. Okay? So from Lucent Technologies, I worked at Rutgers University for a few years. That was a great experience. I love working in higher ed. I love working with college students. I began to become in touch with the process of education and the product that is education, and how important it is to, one, provide education to all of us, all people from all walks of life, because education is the great equalizer. And if our country is to continue to fulfill its promise of greatness, we need to have as educated a workforce as possible, or as skilled a workforce as possible. And getting access to quality education, the more and more people have that, the more and more opportunities are available to them. So I became very passionate about the product of education during my time at Rutgers. From Rutgers, I went on to work back in the engineering field, if you could believe it. But again, not as an engineer, but on the customer support side of one of the premier suppliers of engineering products to the industry. This company is called McMaster-Carr. And for anyone who is listening who has experience in the engineering world, McMaster-Carr produces a catalog that is so revered in the industry that it's commonly known as the engineer's Bible. And it's not an exaggeration. It's a beyond just a list of products. It's actually a resource for information about how these products are used and different ways in which the products can be put together in order to make an application perform a particular task out in the field. So again, working at McMaster Carr, I learned quite a bit about engineering from a really broad perspective. And when I say broad, I mean I got to see and interact with engineers from a variety of different disciplines, and not just engineers, but STEM professionals, science, technology, engineering, and mathematic professionals from a wide variety of settings. So I would interact or have to do research on engineers who are actually working in environmental remediation. And that process involves, there are certain spots where there have been some type of industrial building, like a oil processing facility or something like that, built in an area that facility is closed down, and now in order to make the area safe for another business or something else to be built on that land, you have to have environmental remediators come in and take care of that process, get the land back up to spec. So, from a health perspective, so I've worked with people like that. I've helped researchers at some of the top universities in the country. Um, MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, is one of the biggest customers of Lucent Technology. Excuse me, of McMaster Carr. So I've interacted with the top echelon within the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics community. And through my work, I became very, very passionate once again about this thing that we're calling, and as a general acronym, STEM, be it engineering, be it straight up science, whatever your discipline in STEM is. I began to realize, like, yeah, every aspect of our life is involved with STEM. Everything. There's nothing, you can't look around the room and not interact with something that was designed by an engineer, manufactured by an engineer, or a science professional of some kind, a technology professional of some kind, modeled in a computer, whatever it may be. So it was through my work there that I realized, hey, I have to spread the gospel of how we as a society interact with technology. I had to go out there and let people know, especially those who are in, I would say, between anywhere from seventh grade to seniors in college. Because as you're going through the process of learning math, learning science, or taking classes in an engineering discipline or what have you, it became really apparent to me that in order to truly understand the power that's at your fingertips, you needed to understand what's actually happening out in the real world, quote unquote, the real world. What's happening outside of the realm of the books and the labs in your classrooms? What's going on out in this world? What are some of the possibilities that are out there for you? And then I also, as I mentioned, became just very passionate about making people science and math literate in general, because what I then began to realize is also how much of our day-to-day policies, how much news, how much information is passing us by that impacts our health, that impacts what it is that we can buy, that impacts our society, that we're not taking into account because we just simply don't understand, right? We don't understand what's happening. The whole social media explosion, right? There's a whole science behind what's happening in terms of how these software programs are created, everything else, but we don't understand the impact of the decisions being made in courtrooms or in legislative offices in Washington, because so many of us just don't understand the background technology. We think a lot of these things just happen via magic. Another area where our literacy hampers us is obviously in careers. We just don't know the opportunities that exist. And when I say careers, I don't mean just careers of working for an established organization. How many aspiring entrepreneurs are out there who, if they just had, if they had significant math and science literacy, or understood the impact of different technology events in our society, if they understood the impact, how much difference how many different career opportunities, how many different business opportunities would exist or do exist, do exist that they could leverage and take advantage of. How many different careers folks can enter, how many different business opportunities people can create for themselves based on the understanding of technology, STEM. So I know I've talked a while, and I'm going to let my brother go into his background now, but I wanted to at least, and this is the only episode one will be the only episode where I'll spend this much time kind of going over the background, or the motivation of the podcast. The rest of this podcast, after my brother talks, and in future podcasts, will be about us discussing a particular events, particular really hot topics in the world of technology, and breaking those down and talking about how they impact our society and how they impact you, and how you can therefore act off of the information that we're providing. So what does this mean in terms of where our society is going as far as the tools and different products available to us? What does this mean in terms of career opportunities, business opportunities, economically? We're going to talk about all those things. So we have a topic today, and we'll get to it very shortly. But I wanted to give you that background on me, Kwesi Vincent, to let you know that this is something that I really care about. And I don't know how many people are listening to this or will listen to this, whether it's 1, 5, 10,000. It doesn't matter. It does matter to me, but I hope I at least intrigued you enough to where you'll come back for a second podcast and a third podcast and so on and so forth, because I think these things are very important. And again, this is not about, oh, well, I'm not going to be an engineer, so I don't need to listen to this. No, we're talking about real life things that impact you. Now, obviously, this is the technology stuff, but it's so important. And I just really hope that you stick with us. And whether or not you're an actual student listening to this, a teacher, or a parent, we're going to show you over the course of this podcast how important it is to really have the strong understanding and belief in science, technology, engineering, and math that you need. Belief is the wrong word. The strong understanding and comprehension and literacy in these subject matters, in order to really be a literate member of our society, or a functional member of society. And once again, maybe functional is too hard of a word, but really interacting on a more robust basis, getting out of a consumer mindset, being more of an influencer, being more of a change maker in society, or at least having the ability to make decisions that can benefit you financially and benefit you socially. Okay, but it'll come to fruition. It'll be clearer as we go on throughout the history of the podcast and throughout this particular podcast. So, with that said, thank you for listening. Basir, sorry about that, brother. Are you still awake?
Absolutely. Let me give an intro to myself, and I'll do it in the context of talking about a lot of things we share that are the same, but really where we deviated in our lives. So to begin, what we shared, we both went to Penn State. Let's go State. Kwesi's degree was in electrical engineering, and my final degree was in mechanical engineering. Where we deviated started with how we even picked our majors. My first major was actually computer science and engineering. How I picked that major, which is a very interesting point, which I hope we get to in the point of this podcast, people ask me what I was good at. I was good at math and science. They said I should have been an engineer. I asked everyone, what does an engineer do? No one could really tell me. But our parents made sure that it was an important thing, that the value of STEM was high, so we were pushed towards those majors, and we selected them because we were able to complete the math and science portion, and we grew our skills through that. My first internship was as a computer scientist for Kraft Foods, and I started to learn a lot about how a company as big as Kraft has so many moving parts and so many people with specialized skills. That summer, I practiced a specialized skill that I realized I did not like to do, and that was programming. After that experience, I came back to school and I changed my major immediately because that is not what I wanted to do. In hindsight, I did not necessarily have to do that change, but at the time, that's what I thought was right. Moving forward, my other 2 internships opened up a whole new world that I had no idea existed. I worked for a company called Sendin, which was another office type of position, and then I worked for Pittsburgh Plate Glass, and that was my first foray into manufacturing. My perspective is shaped largely by that experience. When we were younger, we did not, myself and Kwesi, we did not have a lot of experience with the manufacturing industry. And it's something that I have grown to see how much of a pivotal role this sector plays, not only within STEM, but within our society as a whole. And that is some of the perspective that I will be using and speaking from for this podcast. After I graduated, I started as an engineering trainee for Nestle Purina Pet Care, and I still work for that company today. With my internships, I have a total of 11 years of manufacturing experience. That combined with my mechanical engineering degree and my other interest is what I will be bringing to this podcast to provide a different perspective. A perspective of someone who didn't know what they were going to do and who continued to work his way through several different types of jobs and kept turning over new possibilities and chasing those jobs. What I want to do and what I would love to do through this podcast is share those experiences, so maybe some of those times, like me having an internship where it was a little bit too much like the movie Office Space, which made me completely change my major, I would like to share that experience, hopefully save people from a future where they might be scared of what they want to do when they grow up. With that said, I'm going to keep it short and sweet. That is myself. I'm Basir Vincent, and I hope we get a chance to know each other very well as you, the listener, and let's start this journey.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Basir. So we're the STEM brothers, Kwesi and Basir. That's us. Now, let's get into the topic of the week. So, Basir, you and I had selected an article that we both read from the Wall Street Journal about Casio, the folks who make the G-Shock watch. They are entering the smartwatch market. All right. And so, once again, we'll explain things, hopefully we're not insulting anyone's intelligence, but a smartwatch is essentially a watch that has some type of internet connectivity and does a variety of functions, right? It's essentially a cell phone, mini computer type device that's in the form of a watch. Would you say that's correct?
I'd say that's correct. And I really want to start now with let's lay out what a smartwatch is trying to do. You have different categories. You have your single purpose type of smartwatches. I'll put the Fitbit in that category. So Fitbit counts calories and it's growing in functionality. Or you have a full cell phone replacement type of smartwatch, and companies such as Sony and LG have dived into that. And then you have everything in between. Casio is trying to hit that sweet spot with really adding smart functionalities to an existing watch versus using or creating a whole new market. And that's my intro to the Casio smartwatch.
Right. So, reason why we picked this particular topic of the week and reason why we think this was worthy of our topic of the week is because obviously this involves a lot of aspects of technology. The smartwatch market is growing. If you remember, the Apple Watch is now it's Apple's highest selling product right now. It's moving at an incredible pace. It's on back order tons of places, and we have to look at what does this mean? Right? What is the smartwatch craze? What is this? All these different manufacturers, these different consumer electronics companies or different companies, technology companies entering the smartwatch market. What does this mean for our society? So, and what does this mean to you, the listener? Just some numbers to keep in mind, according to IHS from the article in the Wall Street Journal that we saw, the smartwatch sales in 2014, there were a number of units, 3.6 million units sold. By 2020, IHS is predicting that will grow to 101 million units sold. That's tremendous growth. That's tremendous growth. I mean, we're talking about growing by a factor of 100 million watches, just increasing 100 million units, just in the course of 6 years, right? That pace is insane. So let's talk about what we think or what do we think are the factors that are driving the increase in interest in the smartwatch. What do you think?
Well, for me personally, it's the use case. I'm going to go back. So Google has been in this market for a while now. They have their Android Wear, and we'll talk about Android Wear, APK, and programming in a second. A couple other companies that I think have made major hits in this industry, Pebble. Pebble is a smaller watch company. They try to simplify their watch. There's other companies such as Garmin that have been doing watches for years. I had a Garmin watch. A little insight into my personal life. I'm a triathlete. I used a Garmin watch with GPS for tracking my running for years before smartwatches became a craze. If you want to go all the way back, I had a watch with a calculator on it, which by today's standard wouldn't be considered a smartwatch, but it was a watch with more functionality than just telling the time. Now there is a search for a new medium. Cell phones are smaller, slimmer, and we're trying to find a new outlet, a new way to interact. And that's where the smartwatches now are trying to find their home. My opinion, no one's nailed it yet. No one has found that sweet spot of technology and usage. Right now, like I said, some people use their watches for health reasons, so they use it as a fitness tracker, heart rate monitor. Some people use it more of a phone extension. They can check their messages. They can do a few features on it that you can do on your phone, but it's easier to do on your watch. There are people who are working for a further use case, which I want to expand upon because I really think this is the potential of growth, because as both Apple, Pebble, Android, and I'll be curious to see if Casio will do this, it's going to open up to further use and allow the users to determine how should this watch be used. And if you look at history, that's what turned the cell phones around. Applications that users made are what made the iPhone go off into the stratosphere. The iPhone built a certain level of success, but that ability to create that application market is what took it to a whole nother level. And that's what they're hoping to find on one of these watches. That's why Android is pushing their Android Wear. They're teaching people how to program for it. They're trying to get someone to come up with that wearable app where it's like, that's why I need to buy one of these. And I haven't seen that yet.
That's so interesting. So so it's a completely different kind of model from the personal computer, right? Where it wasn't necessarily certainly not about users creating their own software, right? For the PC. We're talking about they've developed a device. Now, in terms of its functionality, it all depends on what applications someone develops, right? So what we see a little bit here, I would surmise then, is not only are we seeing people who see an immediate use for it, but it's also people kind of betting in on the future use. Would you say that that's accurate? Like, people are kind of speculating the utility of the watch. They may not need it now, but they're waiting for that really cool thing to come out to where it becomes indispensable.
Absolutely. I think this is where Casio does have an advantage, because Casio is a watch company that's going into the smart field versus being a cell phone or smart company that's looking back and then trying to dive into watches. So they might have some design, some standard, something that gives them the edge over the other companies that's yet to be seen. And they might flip that whole thing around where it's a watch with some functionality that brings you that, yes, I'm already wearing a Casio watch, but now I'm having a Casio watch that also does this. Right. Versus a lot of these other companies are trying to get people to wear watches when they don't have them already.
Got you. Right. So, based on that then, what would we say are going to be the impact on our usage tendencies? So now that we have the power on our wrist to check our email, now that we have the power on our wrist to what are some of the other big applications, to do heart rate monitor, to calculate a tip at a restaurant, something like that. Not that, well, there were calculator watches out there for years and years now. But whatever the coolest things are about having this kind of technology on your phone, or on a watch, what would you say then? What would you say then as a society? Because they're talking about, to reiterate that stat, we're talking about growing from 3.6 million units in 2014, and in 6 years going about 33 times that in just 4 years. In 2020, where the units are predicted to be at over 100 million. So what kind of changes do you foresee in terms of the usage of cell phones and other types of technologies that will kind of drive this sort of growth, or be a result of this growth?
If this market hits, and that's why I thought it was a very good topic for this first podcast, it creates a format, it creates a place where people can create a new idea. Just as the app market created a place for a whole generation of programmers to now reach users, it's giving that same group, or you if you're listening to this podcast, or anyone out there, it's a potential to reach more people. The exact use might not be there yet, but that's why there is a programmable aspect, at least in the Google and the Apple and the Pebble format, where people are finding their own uses and modifying it to fit their needs specifically. There are people who like something as little as being able to bring up a grocery list on your wrist without having to reach into your phone and grab the pocket.
Right.
It's a small convenience that's something that's already been made a huge convenience from being able to have it on your cell phone.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the hard sell. It's already easy to bring your cell phone places.
Yes.
Now you're trying to tell people, well, it can be a little bit easier if you want to wear this item on your wrist, but it also makes a fashion statement.
Yes.
And that introduction of fashion is where, again, Casio might find that sweet spot. They made watches that people like wearing.
Yes, the G-Shock, yeah, very popular.
So can they hit that sweet spot of giving users, and I'm not sure if Casio is going to go with any particular software, or if they're just going to stick with maybe one or two or three really crucial pieces, like a heart rate monitor. Heart rate monitors and fitness tracking is another industry that's very huge, and they could come in and take that over along with the smartwatch if they find that sweet spot of why people use it.
Yes.
My fiance, she purchased a Fitbit, and she loves it. She tracks all her steps, she tracks all her activities, and she does this through a cell phone app.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The Fitbit is a very basic piece. It's very thin, and it's much more fashionable than having something big on your wrist that would have a screen size that you can actually view that data on. So that's an example of mixing the two, where you have a device that does go around your wrist, but the screen and the functionality that you need to look at a screen, I'm not sure if it'll find its place in today's society on someone's wrist.
Gotcha. Okay. Cool. So we've talked about the impact on society, and so my next question, and you've alluded to it a couple different times, but I think it bears repeating. What is the impact that we see this tremendous growth? Now, obviously, if we're going up from 3.6 million watches sold to over 100 million, there's going to be lots of opportunity. In order to do that, there's going to be lots of work that needs to be done to produce these watches, lots of opportunities. Let's talk about what this means for the world in the marketplace, in the workforce, regarding careers in these areas. What are some of the things that we can expect, some of the areas where we can expect some growth in order to accommodate this new market, this new huge multi-billion-dollar market now that's been created? What can we expect as far as the career growth, career opportunities, and then from there we'll talk about also some of the entrepreneurial opportunities that this could kind of present. So what is your perspective on what are some of the things we can expect career-wise? You sort of touched on a little bit of maybe even the entrepreneurial / career stuff when you talked about Android development, but why don't we go a little bit more into that so people can understand and start taking a look at how they can take advantage of this trend.
So, unfortunately for this topic, I think from a manufacturing standpoint, Casio is a Japanese company. A lot of companies, LG, Samsung, you're not going to see these watches being manufactured in the United States unless there's a very specific use case or if there's a very specific deal that's made. I think the growth of this is in the software development. I think if you are a computer scientist, if you're interested in programming, dipping your toe into the Android APK, into what Apple's offering, into what Windows may be offering with their device that we didn't mention.
Let me stop real quick. Could you mention what APK is again? Did you say APK? Or did I mishear you?
I did. I have to. It's
Okay.
it's the programming language. But
Got you. But yeah, I just wanted to clarify for the listener. So while no problem, we'll just a lot of times acronyms are used, and we oftentimes forget or not even sure because the acronym has been used so much. What the fully expanded term is, you've hardly used it, so you tend to forget. So that's fine. But just for the listener.
So APK is actually specific to Android. It's the Android application package.
Okay, there we go.
So I should correct my statement and say that Android APK, or the equivalent software that you would need to program into the other watches. For example, I know Pebble uses the C language, and C is a specific programming language.
Right.
Android has developed their own training and system behind programmers, and that's very big. That's what Android is all about. It's about having a whole community that's potentially that can develop for their software. And that's really the idea behind, to me, that's the idea behind the main drive of what makes Android and Google different from a lot of other companies. Now, you see companies like Windows trying to do that, trying to teach people or trying to offer similar courses. And Android has a very substantial package. A few weeks ago, Android talked about one of their higher level degrees that they're actually offering in their programming language. It's focused around their APK or Android packaging software.
Gotcha. So they're really driving to create the workforce that's ultimately going to create the applications that drive the demand for the hardware.
Yes.
Okay. So again, we see Google using their resources because they know they can't create everything in-house, even though they have a ton of employees of their own. They need to get that knowledge out there to start so that germinating the seeds of innovation that will then drive the demand for the demand for the hardware that runs their software. So this is very, very important in terms of talking about impact. You mentioned Casio in terms of manufacturing, things like that. Yeah, well, we know in the United States, consumer electronic manufacturing is not a huge. It is kind of gone overseas, and it's not as big. It's not very big at all. There's several cost factors and different things as to why this work has been migrated overseas. So we understand that. But one thing that I will say, from my experience working with a variety of companies over the last 7 years, is that anytime any new technology comes out, while we in America may not be able to take full advantage of the mass manufacturing of the consumer electronics, there are always different support products that we can take advantage of. So whether it's actually manufacturing those support products here, which some people do. So a good example is when I first started at McMaster-Carr, it's when the iPad launched. Okay, and one of the things that I was amazed at, the first few companies that I interacted with at McMaster-Carr were companies that were making covers for the iPad, right? There were 7, 8 employee places that were just, this is what they were doing. They were making designer covers for the iPad, and so that iPad. That market began to grow as more and more people made accessories for those types of devices, iPad, iPhone, etc. So there is another opportunity. So either with companies that are already involved in making accessories for watches, things like that, or dovetailing into the entrepreneurial conversation. Hey, if you see some way that you can add some type of value to the Apple Watch as an accessory, a cover, a case, something like that, this could be a tremendous opportunity for you. So, what are just some of your thoughts on that, really quick?
I think that's great. That's a great idea. There's so many cases, and especially with a watch, where the big thing is fashion with this device.
Right.
That's the biggest deterrent, and you see how Apple has tried to overcome it with, they're offering a gold wristwatch. The technology is the same, but they're charging over $1,000 just for the fashion. Mm-hmm. So as a designer or as someone who might have any type of artistic sense, if you see one of these devices and you can come up with a way to make it more fashionable, more usable, or cool looking, that right there is a perfect example of something that could potentially cause one of these devices to go big.
Absolutely. So, again, whether it's as designing software or apps for the phone, or whether it's doing some type of building an accessory, manufacturing accessory, designing accessories for the phone to make them more fashionable, there are a ton of opportunities being presented by the growth of this new market. There's going to be, I hope you understand, listeners, there's going to be over 100 million 100 million smartwatches out in the market by 2020. Over 100 million. I mean, that's nothing to sneeze at. So these are some of the things we wanted to make sure we covered. Basir, you had a comment? I'm sorry.
One of the other industries that is growing and that these smartwatches are going to make possible is the use of your biometric data. All these watches are gathering more and more biometric data. They're gathering steps. They're gathering distance. They're gathering heart rate. I know Apple got turned away from some of the functionality that they even wanted to put into these watches. And that's going to be a huge, huge marketplace. Soon you'll be able to truly dive into someone's workout routine. So imagine if you're a coach. Imagine if you're a life coach or a workout coach, or you're trying to train for something. This can help you drive that business. Give every person that is working, that's a client of yours, a sample of what you can do with that data. All this data is out there, so being able to actually look at that data, process it, and do something with it. There are certain algorithms that are being created, but there's going to be a space where someone who's really good at the curation and usage of that data could definitely thrive from an entrepreneurial standpoint.
That's tremendous point. Thinking outside of the box. So even if you are not directly impacting the production of the watch, the software on the watch, you can leverage what the information that the software is providing, right? And you can show others how they can leverage it. So if you understand what heart rate is about and how it impacts weight loss and different things like that, you can then coach somebody properly on how to use the information that they're getting from their smartwatch. Tremendous value. Well, Basir, we're at about 48 minutes. A typical podcast is usually about an hour. I think we're going to keep this one under an hour because it is our first one. And I just wanted to give folks a flavor of what's to come for moving forward, because this is something we're going to do every week. As we're recording this, it is Saturday, 4th of July. I plan on having this up by next Tuesday. So Tuesday the 7th is when I plan on having this uploaded, the 7th of July. So I don't know if I'm going to keep to the Tuesday schedule. We'll have to work out when you and I can do these weekly, and then, I get just a day or two post-production to turn these around. So all that to say, listeners, is that we're coming at you every week. Maybe even twice a week somewhere down the line, but we're coming to you at least once a week. And I'm not sure what day it's going to drop, but regardless, we will try. It'll either be it won't be more than 7 days in between podcasts. That much I'm going to commit to you. Okay, so every 7 days you can come back to our podcast website or iTunes or our page on iTunes, and you will have another podcast. We're recording this without all the infrastructure set up. We're recording this on 2 devices, one a little digital recorder and another one my smartphone. We basically said we have a message that we want to get out. We have things that we want to help people learn and understand. So we're just going to do this thing, right? And we'll also be augmenting these podcasts with opportunities for us to come in person. If you're an educator and you would like for us to go through and show you a curriculum you can design for your math class around some of the topics we talked about, we'll love to do that for you, okay? Or any other class. If you do some type of just civics class or whatever, we can design a curriculum around the topics that we're covering week in and week out. So we'll probably put some type of sample or something like that on a website of a type of curriculum that we would provide to you, because there's a ton of things here that you can do with young people to help show them how math and science can be applied in the real world and help them learn the principles that they're going through, so that they understand how these principles of math and science are used to impact the development, the creation, and the dissemination of the technology and the different topics that we cover in the podcast. So we're going to have a lot of augmented services. So again, a curriculum that will come out based on the topic of the week, as well as the opportunity for us to come in and speak and do different things. So this is just the start. We had to get started somewhere. We stumbled over some words. We made a couple mistakes here and there. That's okay. What this is about is just getting started. And this is only the beginning, I promise you. So we will see you in 7 days or less. I want to thank you for taking the time. And again, all our contact information, everything will be wherever you got this podcast from, be it an iTunes page, be it our website. Our contact information is there. Please contact us. We look forward to building this relationship with you, the listener, from here on to whenever. We can't even put a limit on how long this is going to run, because we plan on running this for as long as you guys will have us, and as long as we feel like we're adding value to the world. And I think we really are. So, Basir, this was a great conversation. Any parting words before we cut it off?
No, look forward to hearing from or talking to you guys in the future. And we'll expand on a tremendous array of topics. I hope you keep listening.
Absolutely. Guys, thank you for listening to the STEM Brothers podcast. We are gone.